And giving it 5, 4, 3, sort of one more second. Hi, guess what? I'm back. We just finished doing a live Ask a Traffic Cop segment, and we do that Monday to Friday, but we also have a podcast, and that's what this is. Normally, we pre-record, not in the real world, not live, but today we're doing something different. We are live with Robyn Robertson from TIRF, that's the Traffic Injury Research Foundation. Welcome.
Hey, Sean.
It's always good to have you here. We've done a whole bunch of episodes. We've been doing this for a while, but again, we've always been doing it quietly and privately, and then publishing it later. But we decided to walk on the wild side, and today we're going live, which means that if you're watching this and you're watching it live, you can actually comment. We are currently broadcasting on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. We're on Twitch. Where else are we? We're everywhere. And the only place that you cannot actually interact with us is on Twitter. So if you want to watch us, you can get us on the TIRF YouTube page, the TIRF Twitter page. Okay, Twitter page. You can watch, but you can't talk. So if you want to participate from the TIRF side of things, jump onto the YouTube page. If you want to participate from Traffic Services, you can get us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, or LinkedIn. And yeah, we will. And TIRF's LinkedIn too. I got a message from our producers. It's so fancy. So yeah, we are talking about something that is which is unique, because we talk about impaired driving all the time, and obviously we know that impaired driving is illegal, it's dangerous, there's all sorts of issues with it, but we've always just talked about it as a global issue, and not really gotten into the fact that there are differences between people who are driving impaired, and the title, we put it in the description, it's that impaired or drunk driving, it's a women's issue too. Is that, Did I say that right?
Yeah.
So how is it different for men and women? I think that's really how we just jump into it, because obviously you've got some details, some information.
Yeah, so we have looked at a lot of the research literature over the last 3 decades, and also spent time working with women who are convicted drunk drivers. And I think some of the most fundamental differences between men and women is how much alcohol we consume and how our body metabolizes it. So when you drink alcohol, it goes into your stomach. Depending on how much food's in your stomach, it goes through your pyloric valve into your lower intestines and is distributed in your blood. With women, we have less of an enzyme in our stomach called dehydrogenase, which means we don't break down as much alcohol in our stomach, and more of it goes through directly into our bloodstream.
Wow.
In addition, women also have less water in their body than males, which is a diplomatic way of saying we have more fat in our bodies than males. And because of that, we have less water in our bloodstream to dilute the alcohol. So essentially, if you took a man and a woman who had, kind of eaten the same meal and approximately the same size, if they had the same amount to drink, the woman would actually have a higher blood alcohol concentration than a man. So as women, we don't metabolize alcohol the same, which means we cannot drink as much. We become more impaired drinking less. Let me put it that way.
That's fascinating. And obviously for the people watching, we're talking about biological women and the fact that there is a difference physiologically. Yeah. And it makes it, I've arrested both men and women for impaired operation. I'm not a breath technician, so that's something that I'm sure they know lots about. But I've never had this discussion about what would cause a man versus a woman to have different effects. We talk about the fact that everybody deals with alcohol differently, but globally, and I've never looked at it from male versus female.
Yeah, and I mean, there's other important differences too, like how much you have to eat before you drink can also affect how impaired you become. So if you're not eating before you're drinking, or if you're eating a salad before you're drinking, that means more of the alcohol goes through your stomach because there's nothing in there to hold it in, and means it goes to your bloodstream faster without being broken down. Whereas if you're eating like pasta or pizza or hamburger, something that has carbs, something that has fats, that means more of the alcohol stays in your stomach and gets broken down. So your blood alcohol concentration doesn't go quite so high.
So there's so many factors beyond. I mean, we know that there's factors beyond that of who you are, physically. But yeah, your diet makes a huge difference, and it's always been that concept of eating or not eating, I think, which is global. But it's very interesting that you bring up what you're eating.
But where there isn't a difference, Sean, is how fast your body metabolizes out alcohol. So one of the important things for women in particular to be aware of too is we often talk about your body will metabolize about a drink an hour. And when I say a drink, I mean a standard drink, either beer, wine, or spirits, not the mega pints and the mega drinks.
I just had one this big.
I just had one this big. But your body only metabolizes alcohol so fast. So when you hear that one drink an hour piece, that's actually for men. That's for a 6 foot, 180 pound man, right? Women, it takes us longer. So when you're going out with male friends or your spouse, it's difficult for women to match them drink for drink, because as women will become impaired faster biologically than men, and particularly drinking the same amount. So for women, it's a little more than an hour. So when you're thinking about how much you're drinking, you have to keep that in mind, that it takes us longer.
And those are estimates, because beyond that estimate, it could take someone who matches that description to take even longer. So, and the biggest problem we have is that once we start drinking, our ability to judge and estimate how we are on that scale of impairedness, we are, and very often we are impaired, even though we're well below the legal limit, and you can be arrested and charged for impaired driving, even if you are not over 80. And there's other things to take into consideration, but impairment can be any amount of alcohol, because everyone deals with it differently. I don't know if you've seen the same video that I always reference, but we have some training videos. In one of them that always stands out is of a man who is fall down drunk. At least that's the best way I can describe him. He's having difficulty balancing and staying upright. He's slurring his words. He's a mess. He blows somewhere around 100, 150, something like that. Whereas a woman walks in later on in another scene, and they are straight as an arrow. Nothing, you would never, ever believe that this person's impaired. And I believe they blew 300 or 400. So everyone deals with alcohol very differently. But that doesn't mean you should be driving under the influence of it.
Right. And I think the most important thing for people to know is we're not good at gauging how impaired we are. So if you're out at a party and you're working on how you feel as a baseline for whether or not you should drive, that's a big mistake, because alcohol impairs your judgment among a whole bunch of other things. So generally what happens is people will have one drink and start to feel it and say, oh, I shouldn't drive. But then they'll have another drink. And because their inhibitions are lowering, they're like, oh, I'm fine to drink. So basing your decision to drive on how you feel is a really risky proposition, because to your point, Sean, people, even with one or two drinks, some of them can be very impaired at that level. And that's why we have those low BAC provincial offenses here in Ontario as well as other jurisdictions.
Did you ever see the movie Weird Science?
Yes.
Do you remember the scene where a young man's in the backseat? These are young kids, and they're basically, I dare I say, they're geeks. I think they would agree that would be the description that they would have used. They make a woman at home in a computer, and magic comes into play. But at one point they're blitzed, or at least the guy in the back seat is, and he says, "I'm fine to drive. Give me the keys." And you are not making good decisions when you're drunk. That's part of being drunk.
Yeah.
But I got to clip that video.
Yeah, and I think the other thing people may not always appreciate is the way that alcohol affects you. So some of the effects of alcohol on the brain include lapses in memory, lapses in judgment, and then physically you see the slurred speech, you see slowed motor coordination and reaction times, which are critical for driving. And then it also affects what we call executive functions in the brain. So those are things like our ability to perceive distance. So what happens after you drink alcohol and then you decide to drive, you're more likely to take risks. And that's why we see a lot of impaired drivers and fatal crashes are either speeding or also not wearing their seatbelt. They have difficulty maintaining a constant speed and trajectory. So staying on the road, staying between the lines and driving at a constant speed. And then they also have decreased attention or concentration, which means they're not situationally aware of what's happening around their vehicle. And it makes you tired too. It doesn't help you sleep, but it does make you tired. So those are some of the ways alcohol affects us and how that translates into our driving on the road.
There's a lot of stuff that we've been talking about for a very long time. Since I can remember being a kid, we've all talked about, don't drink and drive and all the conditions and worries and risks. Do you think there's a reason that we're not getting it today, that we're still not making significant inroads into stopping it? Because I was saying 2 weeks ago, not this past weekend, but the weekend before, we had 25 or more arrests in the Toronto area, or in the city of Toronto, along with almost 10 people who failed a roadside screening device, which is where they were under the not criminal but still not permitted to drive. There's this consistent misuse. Is it confusion? Are we not messaging it properly? And are we messaging it properly for the people we're trying to get a hold of?
Right. So a couple of important points there. So one, we have seen significant reductions in fatal crashes involving alcohol for a long time. We're seeing a little bit of an uptick since we legalized recreational cannabis. We are seeing an uptick in fatal crashes for impaired. But across the board, it's really a small population of people who drink and drive. So the good news is the vast majority of Canadians choose not to drink and drive. But what we've seen in the last few years is when we ask people, have you driven within 2 hours of drinking any amount of alcohol, as well as driving when you think you're over the legal limit, we are seeing a starting to increase. So we're in the 12, 14% range. But that's 12 or 14% of 26 million drivers. So that's really a lot of people on the road. And what we are seeing is people who are doing it more frequently, I guess. So social norm-wise, most Canadians don't, but there is a proportion who do, and we need to change our strategies to get to that population who is more persistent in their behavior.
See, I always talk about Toronto because that's what I have access to in terms of information. And you are looking at all of Canada, which is really a totally different perspective. So to hear that we've got fewer fatalities Canada-wide as a result of the work we're doing in the organizations that do a great job at trying to educate and dissuade people from making the bad choice of impaired driving. So that's great. But the fact that there's been an uptick since marijuana became legal is concerning. So that's something that I know you've mentioned before, but it's interesting. So is it specifically as a result of cannabis influenced drivers that are involved in fatal collisions?
So we are seeing an uptick in cannabis positive drivers, but I think the other important piece is the combination of cannabis with alcohol.
Uh-huh.
So that is particularly risky because the impairing effects of cannabis with alcohol are additive. So even just a little bit of alcohol with cannabis can do a lot to affect your crash risk. So I think helping people, one, understand that using cannabis does increase your crash risk for a population of drivers, and then combining that with alcohol is even more dangerous.
Very often people don't take that into consideration. They say that marijuana is fairly harmless and a drink is fairly harmless, but if you combine the two, you get that magnification where they play off one another and it's no longer harmless. My suggestion is always don't drink or drive, don't consume drugs. Just don't do it at all. There's so many good options, especially when we're, someone from Toronto being me, I look at all the options, great opportunities for, the bus and TTC, the options here are endless. And then you start getting into the fact that aside from, transit, you have taxis and Ubers and so many things. Planning the ride home is where things should start.
Yeah.
if you're going to be consuming.
You're absolutely right, Sean. The safest choice is to just not use cannabis, not drink alcohol when you're driving. Driving is a huge responsibility, and when you're driving, you do have other people's lives in your hands, and they can be significantly injured. And those people are family members, right? They're someone's family member, they're someone's friend, they're someone's colleague. So yeah, doing more to make those choices and to help people understand those choices important. And I think one of the gaps that we're seeing is when it comes to women. One of the studies that we did in Ontario a few years ago with funding from Beer Canada was looking at the issue of drinking and driving among women. And one of the interesting things we found is that for women, a lot of the prevention messaging and the education campaigns don't really resonate with them, because where they drink, why they drink, how they drink isn't the same as for men. There's actually different profiles of women who drink and drive compared to men. So a lot of the education and prevention you see, there are people in a bar drinking, it's that house party and, someone about to drive home. That doesn't necessarily reflect where and why women drink. And when women drink, a lot of the alternatives in terms of, take public transportation, take a bus, take a cab, take a ride share. For women, the concern is personal safety.
Yeah.
Right. Because as a woman drinking, and then when you're alone, you're definitely more vulnerable. That's the reality. So for a woman who's had something to drink, is leaving a bar or restaurant, feels a little bit impaired. They're not inclined to get into a car with a stranger and give them their home address. That's just a reality.
Things that I've never really had to think about. And I mean, for two reasons. One, I don't really drink. And two, I can't, it's hard to put myself in the perspective of someone who has all these other things. I'm 6'5" and 300 pounds. I'm not thinking about the same things going out. So it's really interesting to hear that perspective. Yeah. But, what are the best tips then to set someone up for success?
The best tips, Sean, are to have a plan and then to have a plan B, particularly if you're using a designated driver. Today, the concept is really about sober drivers. So your designated driver historically was supposed to be someone who didn't drink and ended up being the person who drank the least and was most to drive. And today, it's really about having a sober driver. So when you're out in a group and you have a sober driver, support them. One of the things that we heard from women is they often feel peer pressure from their friends when they're out celebrating to drink, even though they're the designated driver. And then when it comes the end of the night and they don't feel safe to drive, they still drive because they feel peer pressure because their friends thought they were the ride home. So supporting the person who is the designated driver, the sober driver, is really important. If your sober driver plan falls through, what is your plan B in terms of how you're getting home? Are you calling a family member or calling a friend, and making those, creating those opportunities? If you know one of your friends is out celebrating, tell them, hey, if you need a ride home, if something goes south, call me and I'll be your sober ride. Doing more to support each other in our decision to abstain from drinking when we're driving, and doing more to plan ahead, because making a plan after you've had 3 drinks at a party isn't a good way.
That is not the time to start thinking about your options. You need to have that level head, and then also sort of be aware enough to be able to say, okay, when I'm there, I got to stick to that plan, because it's easy to be persuaded to change your mind. Even when you go there, I'm leaving by 9 o'clock, and then 12 a.m. you're still there. Very interesting. Now, it's the season. You got a beautiful tree up. This is where people are out socializing, and part of socializing is where people are very often saying, "You just have another." It's that pressure to want to make people happy, whether it's the host at a party or you're out at a work event, and obviously we hope that people aren't pushing alcohol or other things onto others. But how do you respectfully say no? Because I think hurting people's feelings and disappointing people is a big thing.
Yeah. Well, I think leading with I'm the sober driver. I committed to my friends, to my family. I'm their safe ride home, and I want to make sure that they get home safely. So thank you, but no. I think having the people who are counting on you as a sober driver also speaking up and saying, no, wait, that's my ride. Let's have some non-alcoholic options. And then I think also being prepared to speak up if the evening's unfolding and it looks like someone is going to make a poor choice to drive. What are those conversation starters? How do you have that conversation constructively? And there's two great resources to get that information. One is our Sober Smart education program, which has a lot of those facts and tips. A lot of what I'm talking about today, you can find those facts, and those are great conversation starters. So when someone's encouraging another woman to have a drink, it's like, hey, wait, as women, we can't metabolize alcohol the same. So I'm going to choose no. There's also Drink IQ, which has a lot of great information about alcohol in the body and the effects of drinking. So if you're looking for good information and those quick facts to speak up and prevent someone from driving after drinking, those are two great resources to work with.
And Drink IQ, can I actually, I'm going to put some things on screen because I can do that.
You're so talented, Sean.
No, I'm cutting and pasting.
Technology at your fingertips.
I'm simply cutting and pasting because a birdie is sharing this information with me. And let's see here. Do I have it? There we go. So I can put that Drink IQ. Did it work? Yes, it did. That is a play. Now, what is a Drink IQ? Tell us more about Drink IQ.
So Drink IQ actually allows you to take a quiz. We often think that we know a lot about alcohol and we know a lot about drinking and driving, and Drink IQ is a place where you can actually find out answers to some of those common questions that we have. Like, what's the difference between, one of the common ones is, what's the difference between beer, wine, and hard liquor? We often think that drinking beer is less impairing than drinking something like hard liquor. And
it's like water for most people, right?
The reality is, well, it depends on what kind of beer you're drinking. But
I drink actual water.
Exactly. But the reality is a drink is a drink is a drink. So whether it's a standard beer, a standard glass of wine, or a standard shot of hard liquor or a mixed drink, the alcohol content's the same. So it's not like, I can have two beers and that's just one drink with hard liquor. It's like, no, a drink is a drink is a drink.
Okay, I'm going to put the other website up so we can talk about something else and come back to the sobersmartdriving.turf.ca. But a birdie told me about the idea of mocktails and sharing these recipes with the host in advance. But I've got one better. Do you know what looks like alcohol but isn't alcohol? Water. You put water and ice in a cup and walk around with it. And when someone offers you a drink, I'm good. I'm only drinking this tonight. I'm good. You don't have to get into what's in the glass. But always, if you have a glass that's full of something, it's great. And you can throw a lemon in and decorate it as though it was something that is fancy schmancy and maybe more exciting than water. But water works.
And that's one of the good strategies, actually, when you're out at a party, is to drink a glass of water for every drink that you're drinking. And particularly, like when you're drinking alcohol, you need to stay hydrated, right? That's why you wake up the next morning when you've had several drinks. You wake up in the morning and you feel terrible. Drink water before you go to bed. Drink water while you're out. Have water with every drink that you're having. And you're right. When people ask you, do you need another drink? It's like, no, I'm good with what I got, thanks. So, just being comfortable saying no, because no one wants to see an impaired driver on the road.
But it is a skill to develop the ability to say no. I know that when I started as a court officer many moons ago, I had a difficult time telling anyone no. I mean, I was in jail. A guy would want an extra cheese sandwich. I'm like, well, it's only a cheese. No, I had to learn how to say no. So it's a skill that I had to work on. Now I can tell everybody no. In fact, they called me the CEO of no when I first started doing what I do on social media because people say, is this legal? No. Everything's no. I'm really good at it now. Anyway, sobersmartdriving.turf.ca. What do we find there?
Okay, so that's where, if you want to learn about the laws and penalties in Canada, not just the criminal penalties, which are federal at 08, but also the low BAC penalties at 05 across provinces, you can learn about that. You can learn about how alcohol affects your driving. You can learn about how alcohol plays a role in fatal crashes and your crash risk. And you can make some comparisons between, what's happening in Canada and what we do in Canada versus what we do in the US. I know you've had a couple of US police officers on, and yes, their impaired driving system and their laws and their penalties are very different than in Canada. So, and you can learn about who drinks and drives and why people drink and drive. And like I said, men and women, very different reasons. The research that we did around women, so we talked to more than 150 convicted female impaired drivers.
Wow.
And the things that they told us suggest that there's really three different profiles of women. So the first is your younger, college age, early 20s crowd, and they drink to fit in. They drink before they go out, and they will often try and keep up with the guys in their social group, and they drive themselves because they know that they're their safe ride home, which may seem counterintuitive, but they're thinking personal safety, not road safety. Then you've got women in their late 20s, early 30s who maybe would never have had a drinking problem, but they meet a partner or a spouse, and their drinking picks up to keep up with them. Or they have children. We talked to a number of women that said, once I had children, my drinking took off. And you see these women drinking on play dates. Kids get together, they're drinking on play dates. Come 4:00 in the afternoon, they've had several glasses of wine, and they're not going to call their husband or their spouse and say, hey, I've been drinking here all afternoon with our 3-year-old. Would you like to come pick me up and drive me home? So they make the choice to drive.
I can imagine them not wanting to be found out. That's not something you want to admit.
Exactly. And then you see women in their 40s and 50s who may have gone through something significant in their life. Their children have left home, they're going through a divorce, a parent is sick, or a parent has died, and they end up drinking at home and drinking daily. And that becomes kind of a regular part of their routine as a coping mechanism. So most of the women we talked to said something happened in their life immediately prior to them getting arrested for drinking and driving that contributed to their drinking. And they often picked up not just one, but several arrests, incidents in a short period of time. So those are some of the flags that we see with women drinking and driving.
So not excuses, but certainly understandable things that people go through different stressors, and those they set forth a set of events that could take someone who had never had the intention of breaking the law into a position where they're just making poor decisions. I can understand that. We do a lot. We see a lot, and the way I categorize this, growing up as a member of OSED and being involved with different groups that were concerned about the impaired driving issues, is we saw ads that marketed or targeted teenagers and young drivers versus older drivers. You seem to see that it appeared that there were different designations of ads. This is for a grown-up. This is for a young person. Party. Should they be divided more? We're talking about women's issues that are different than men's. Maybe we should be targeting education that way.
Yeah, and what we do know from the research around education campaigns is it does need to be personally relevant. So people need to see themselves in the situation. So just talking now about women, you don't see ads about drinking and driving with women having a social afternoon with a play date with their kids. So when they see those kind of late hours, young people drinking in a bar, that doesn't reflect their experience. So they may not resonate with that. Same with older people. We often think, and a number of impaired drivers do age out of impaired driving, like they age out of criminal offending generally. But we talk to women in their 50s, 60s, and 70s who are grandmothers who had been convicted for drinking and driving. So that perception that it's just one type of person who does it is wrong. These are people from all walks of life, and to your point, find themselves in a situation, make a poor decision, and there they are.
And because that poor decision is usually made on the heels of already being impaired, it's easy to find your way down that road. It's not a defense. It just happens to be that you get there, and that's where you are.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the other interesting things I did want to talk about, Sean, while we're talking about age, is the difference between young drivers and then kind of your young 20-something drivers. So young drivers, of course, are at risk because they have a higher crash risk. Like in the last 5 years, on average, about 16% of drivers killed in fatal crashes were aged 16 to 24. But that age group only actually represents 11% of the population. So young drivers as a whole are overrepresented in fatal crashes. And when we look at drinking in particular, we see a little bit more than 1 in 4 16 to 19-year-olds killed in fatal crashes were positive for alcohol, and that's compared to about 30%, one in 3 for all ages. But then when we look at the 20 to 24, it's actually 42%.
Holy moly.
So there's something that happens between the 16 and 19-year-old versus the 20 to 24-year-old where we're seeing an increase in alcohol and fatal crashes in those age groups. And that's why zero tolerance laws are so important. And that's why they've been extending kind of the zero tolerance laws as part of graduated driver licensing programs for a few years to protect them. But that 20 to 24-year-old group positive for alcohol, it's such a shift because at a young age they learn don't drink and drive. They've heard that message over and over, but something seems to happen when they're 20, and maybe it's they've gained more experience driving, they feel more comfortable driving,
Comfort.
there's more peer pressure. Yeah. So
or do you have just enough skill and just enough ability to make really bad decisions? Because, you know, as you're telling me this story, I'm listening and I'm like, I can totally relate to that. And we know that young people tend to think they're a little less risk of getting hurt. Like that's the unbreakable period where you could do anything and you won't get hurt. Invincible. Yeah. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah,
so
Health Canada did some research that young people were not afraid of dying, but they are afraid of being maimed or injured, and that risk taking across the board for young people is important. But to go back to the drink IQ content, one of the other important differences is as we age, we also don't metabolize alcohol as well. So
the rate slows.
Yeah, it takes older individuals, and I got to be careful what I say because I'm getting into that age category now. But it takes older individuals longer to break down alcohol, and so when you drink alcohol, you kind of have an ascending and a descending curve. So when you start drinking, your BAC starts going up. And then when you stop drinking, it takes a while, and then your BAC comes down.
Everything takes longer when you're older.
As your BAC comes down, it takes longer for adults to recover. And that's the also interesting thing with people choosing to drink and drive is when you start drinking, your baseline is sober. So when you start drinking, you can feel the difference. But once you've been drinking and you're impaired by alcohol, when you stop drinking, you start to feel better. And that's the time when people make the decision, I feel okay to drink and drive. It's because they're comparing how they feel now to how impaired they were and not to how they feel when they're sober.
Now, I'm about to put something on screen, and that is the Turf blog. And just to acknowledge, a moment ago I had on screen that it said, that'll never happen to me. That Ryan Pinn, who's a driving instructor in Nova Scotia and often joins us in our lives, was sharing. Now, I'm sure he's talking about his students, not him, because he knows stuff. But the Turf blog, so Weakest Link Ladies Night, what's that post about?
So the weakest link is your plan, right? Your weakest link is the person who says they're going to be your sober driver and ends up drinking. So that goes back to the whole having a plan B, making sure you have a solid strategy to get home, particularly if your first strategy fails, because like we said, you don't want to be doing that when you're drinking. And I mean, Ryan's comment, perhaps that'll never happen to me, maybe a little bit that mentality, right? That when they make the decision to drive after drinking, they think I'll be safe. I'm not going very far. I'm not that impaired. I'll take back roads. And The reality is you don't control the road. You don't control that unexpected event that happens. So whether you drove the road all the time, whether it's late, whether there's no traffic, that doesn't mean the unexpected can't happen. So I think the mentality sometimes for people when they're making that choice to drive after drinking, and it is a choice, is they think that won't happen to me. And I can tell you with all the impaired drivers that we spoke to, the one thing universally, men and women, they wish they could take it back, particularly when they hurt or killed someone. It's only at that point when they realize the magnitude of the consequence or the potential consequence that could have happened. So that'll never happen to me attitude, unfortunately is more prevalent, and people don't realize that until it's too late.
Well, and there's no undo button, and it doesn't matter whether you're speeding or using your cell phone or drinking and driving and using drugs and driving. There is no undo, and you can't take it back. And I've spoken to people who have lost family members, who have been the victims and the community members of the community. People don't understand, at least I don't think they do, or it's not something that they acknowledge immediately, that it's not just about dying. It's not just about hurting someone, is that someone has a someone or has a group of someones, and it's communities that are affected. Yeah. So, it becomes a reality after it happens. And until then, it's just, I'll be fine. It'll never happen to me.
Yeah. Well, and it's not just, the community, but you think about all the young drivers and the high school age students who have lost someone in their school as a result of drinking and driving. And then think about the first responders, the police who have to do the notifications, the fire and paramedics who have to extricate, right, and rescue or recover. That stays with you, that haunts you. And when we make those unsafe choices on the road, that's who we're impacting.
Yeah, it's there's way more. I was recently speaking at a college. I was invited to speak to a law enforcement class, and one of the questions from somebody in the group was, "What's the worst call you've ever been to?" I've been to a lot of bad calls, and what people don't remember is that you're asking someone to relive the trauma of all those calls. We carry that with us. So aside from the fact that we address the fact that maybe you shouldn't ask first responders about their worst call because that's traumatizing, but it is something that everybody tied to an event takes away and lives with, and it adds to it. So whether it's once in your life because you caused something, it's forever for so many other people.
Yeah, absolutely. That one moment with a poor decision lasts a lifetime.
But we hope that these things never happen to you. We hope that the people watching this, that if you're watching this, you can take away something, arm yourself with some great knowledge to help you better deal with the next time you're at an event or making a plan. And that's where the success is. It's planning ahead. We've given you some great content. You've given us some great content in terms of different ways to let's see here, to go in and get some web. Well, we're going to put all this in the description for the videos, but lots of great places to go and get resources. And I understand that you've also got some great artwork that you can print out that you can share.
Yeah. We have blogs, we have fact sheets, we have infographics, and what I would do is challenge everyone in advance of holiday celebrations to go to Drink IQ and find that one tidbit, that one fact that they can use on those nights when they're out celebrating with friends, or go to Sober Smart Driving. Both Beer Canada and Diageo did great jobs with these resources, and that's exactly what you need to start the conversation.
What is the line art posters I heard about?
So on Sober Smart Driving, there are posters that you can use in your workplace, that you can use in schools, that you can use really anywhere, that talk about some of the messaging, that tackle some of the myths for people in terms of drinking and driving. So the line art have important messages. Like the big one for employers and employees is once you have a criminal conviction for impaired driving, that can limit your travel options.
Yes, a lot of people don't realize that the U.S. can turn you away for drug or any criminal charges. But we recently heard a story through TikTok that someone was trying to get into the States and got a lifetime ban.
Yep.
I mean, 5 years is the average, but lifetime, you're not suitable to enter the country. Sorry, goodbye. And apparently there is no way to challenge that.
Yeah, so for the U.S., for the customs coming across the border, it's considered a crime of moral turpitude, which means they have discretion. So if they want to bar you from entry, they can bar you from entry. And in Canada, we've had that for years, right? For a lot of Americans with impaired driving convictions, they get to the border and they realize they can't cross because in Canada, we won't let you in for an impaired driving conviction.
Things that people don't consider. Well, many people don't consider impaired driving or other things that are serious and dangerous to be crimes. They don't see they're not concerned. They think they're minor until, of course, they get that education where they realize, ooh, it's big. It's serious. It means something. They obviously take it seriously in the United States, and we should be taking it seriously here. I'm going to sneeze.
So for people hosting holiday parties too, they may want to look at the line art posters in Sober Smart Driving and just print two off. They're printable in all sizes. Just print two off and put them on the walls to start a conversation during the party and to send a message, about the importance of separating drinking and driving to keep everyone safe.
So you just triggered a thought. When you consider hosting a party as the host, there's an opportunity for you to be the responsible one. So hopefully, if you're taking care of everybody else's happiness and festiveness, you're also taking care of their safety. And you can be held responsible for over-serving or allowing somebody to get behind the wheel of the car from a. There's all sorts of implications. So this is an opportunity to decorate with some conversation starters, and that's awesome. I like the idea. And workplace stuff too. There are a lot of work parties that get out of hand, from what I understand. Although I've never been to one of those. But the deal is that you could do something, even if it's minor, by decorating. Like I love the idea of these posters, so I look forward to seeing those. And what else?
Yeah, the posters. I should tell you that the posters were created by a young Canadian artist.
I might know this artist. Is it the artist I know?
This is Kylie Bowman. She has Mildly Mad Graphics, and she's done some great visuals for us. So we're happy with her and Jen in our office. They both work together to make those posters happen.
And actually, she's responsible for our caricatures on the episode art that's related to this episode. So yes, very cool. Kylie's awesome. We recently I got to spend time with Kylie when we were in Ottawa speaking.
When we talked about large trucks.
It was all about big trucks.
Yeah.
I will just because we can. We'll add the link to Mildly Mad Graphics for anybody who wants to see some of the amazing stuff that Kylie has produced. And now you'll know exactly where all the magical stuff from Turf comes from.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this has been awesome. We've been chatting for like 40-ish minutes. And if there's anything you want to leave our viewers or listeners with, this would be that opportunity to close. Because I think we've covered it all. This has been good. Been really good.
Yeah.
Possibly
like
great.
I said, I just with the holidays coming up, lots of people on the roads, lots of people busy, lots of big trucks on the road delivering all those things that we are looking for Christmas and the holidays. I would challenge everyone to go to Drink IQ, go to Sober Smart Driving, get your top 1, top 2 talking points and talk about them as you're celebrating to help create that awareness that most Canadians don't drink and drive, and we want to be part of the majority.
And so one other thing I want to jump back to, a lot of people think this is the season not to drive impaired. This is ride season. This is when they're going to catch you. It's always ride season. We are always looking for impaired drivers. We have an enforcement group called the Vision Zero Enforcement Team. They are always looking for the Big Four. The Big Four happen to be speeders, aggressive drivers, distracted drivers, and of course, impaired. Did I say impaired drivers twice? In any case, we are always looking for people who are putting others at risk. And with the with everyone out now, going out and having these little celebratory opportunities, it's never a time to drink and drive or drive anything but sober. Don't start now. Don't ever do it. If you're going to drive,
but
drive sober.
what we see with fatal crash is actually October and May.
Really, those are the upticks?
Those are our peak periods for fatal crashes, and we've done a great job at Christmas having the intensive enforcement to really focus on not drinking and driving, particularly around the holiday season, but actually it's a year-round thing, to your point, Sean.
100%.
And police are out there doing a fantastic job every day to make sure we all get home safe.
Well, you just really spiked my interest. I was saying goodbye, and now I want to know why those 2 months are the upticks. What do you think causes those spikes? Have you found anything that really correlates or directs us as to a reason why?
Well, there's a couple of hypotheses. One is most fatal crashes happen on sunny days with clear, dry roads.
Really?
So in winter, people tend to drive more cautiously. We have that lovely Canadian mixed bag winter of all kinds of things. But when the weather's warmer, when it's sunny, when it's clear, there's a lot of long weekends in May. We have our long weekends in October. So probably those are factors that contribute. You got a lot of people visiting family and friends, May 2-4, Thanksgiving. So there's a bunch of reasons, but
so there's still social events that are
to be cautious on the nice sunny days.
Okay. Well, yeah, it reminds me of a joke where a young man is slowing down for all the green lights, and he says, "Well, why are you slowing down for the green lights? Because my brother's running all the red ones." There's always something to be looking for, and it's just. I'm glad that we get to have these conversations, and we do this on a fairly regular basis, you and I and other members of TURF, where we get to bring up interesting and really awesome topics that no one seems to talk about except you and me and we.
Well, because road safety is actually very interesting, Sean. Right?
No way.
When I tell people what I do for a living, I get all kinds of questions, just things people want to know. So I think your show does a great job answering a bunch of those questions.
Thank you.
Putting those topics on the radar to help people understand, what some of the risks are, and more importantly, how to stay safe.
It's funny. If you would have asked me 2 years ago if I would have been able to forecast the success of what we're doing here at Traffic Services, you would have never had me estimating 600,000 people watching us on TikTok. It's really interesting. And one of the things I say is learn about traffic safety, traffic law, and you become the most popular person at every party.
Yeah. Well, and Toronto Police Services does a great job increasing awareness about those issues and talking about the importance of not just enforcement, but helping people stay safe.
It is the goal. And at the end of the day, it's about people getting to where they have to go safe and sound. Well, thank you very much, Robyn. It's, as I said, it's always a pleasure. And I look forward to doing this again real soon.
Okay. Great to see you as always, Sean. And yes, we're definitely in for another episode.
Sounds good. Maybe before the end of the year, which is only, no, I don't think we'll make it before the end of the year. But maybe, who knows? Because anything can happen. All right.
We can do it.
Yeah. Awesome. For everyone who's made it to this point, the very end, thank you so much for spending time with us on TPS Traffic Jam. Don't forget to tune in Monday to Friday, as long as I make it to work. I do this thing called Ask a Traffic Cop. We're on all the platforms, but we're also everywhere that podcasts are available. So if you want this in an audio-only version, you can get that in the Apple podcast shop app, whatever you want to call it. You can get us on Spotify. We're hosted by Anchor because it's free, but we like them. All right, have a great weekend. It is Friday. Have a great weekend. Drive safe, drive sober, and we'll see you again soon.